Hello and welcome to ACTV 20's Health Matters. I'm Dr. Erich Parks, and I'm really happy that you've joined us today because I have a great guest. Her name is Suzanne Grace, and she has quite a history. I wanted to introduce some of the things that Suzanne has done in her past. She's had a background in choreography, a dance instructor. She teaches yoga. She's instrumental in a lot of the different programs that involve personal development. And we're going to learn all about that today. So welcome, Suzanne.
Great, thank you. I'm glad to be here today to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit more about your journey. How did you get to the point where you're at right now? I know you wanted to talk a little bit about your past. So
Yes, my original career was in the performing arts as a professional modern dancer, choreographer, and artistic director of my own dance company. So I spent most of my adult life performing on stages, creating dances, etc. And I moved into studying yoga and meditation and kind of started to move away from the performing arts and more into the healing arts. Studied massage, acupressure, meditation, yoga. And so I kind of changed my focus. And then I became a licensed spiritual practitioner. I did 2 years of study in metaphysics and different philosophies, bridging spirituality and science. And then I became a life coach, which even expanded it more. And so I realized my creativity as a choreographer is perfect in supporting people to be creative and choreographing their own life in a positive way.
wow, that's great. So you're helping people get direction. Sometimes I know life can be a bit stressful, confusing. We tend to get caught up in cycles and our own programming, but you can reprogram that, I guess is what you're saying. We can look at our lives from the outside and say, there's a bigger picture here. And
yes, it's very possible. No matter how long someone has had a belief, a pattern, or a behavior that is no longer serving them, it's not that difficult actually to change. And I have, in my studies, have different what are called quantum processes, which allow people to drop into a place in their awareness where change is possible. One of my bylines right now is, I move you from what is to what's possible.
that's a good tagline. I like that because that helps us to realize potentials that perhaps we didn't realize were there. So speaking of health and wellness, this is really your focus. I know is helping people get healthy. And we oftentimes think of healthy as just what you eat and maybe what you do. But how about, I guess you're in the realm of changing how we think. Changes our outcomes. And that's probably, in my experience, one of the most important aspects of health is what are we thinking about from moment to moment.
Yes.
So is that, tell us a little bit about that aspect of thought creating reality for our health.
Well, I believe, and it's talked about a lot now, that our health is holistic. It's not just about the foods we eat. We can pay a lot of attention to not eating processed foods, too much sugar, things like that can create toxicity in our system.
Sure.
But we can also have toxic thinking. We can be holding on to resentment and anger in our mind, and those toxic thoughts create toxic chemicals in our body. And so they're as unhealthy as toxic food. So I really use a holistic approach with people. It's not only the food you eat and the thoughts you think, it's also the way you're feeling in the world and in your life. And so there's ways to open yourself to, again, possibilities of shifting your thinking, shifting the way you react to something and be more responsive by doing different techniques and practices.
Well, you've opened up a great question, which is, if we knew what we needed to do and we had an idea of what we could change to make our lives better, why is it so hard to change that thought process?
That's a great question. Change is like a river, and often when we're standing on that bank, it's scary. It's scary to step into the water. The reason is because we are used to drama in our lives, or we're used to the way we've been. I just heard an article by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he said 60,000, we have 60,000 thoughts that run through our mind every day, and like 10% of them are from now. Like most of them, 90% of them are from the past, from our memory. So we tend to run on memory, on old beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. It's just the way we're wired. And until we recognize it, that, oh, I'm doing something that doesn't feel good to me or that I would like to change, until we recognize it, we'll keep repeating the same pattern.
Right.
So we have to break the pattern just by being aware of it. It's called metacognition. Once we become aware that this isn't working, we then have the ability to change it.
I got you. Well, I think that it strikes a familiar chord with me because of some of the self-improvement programs that I've been through. One of them involved wearing a rubber band on my wrist, and when I would think of things that would not serve me or I wanted to change, I would snap my wrist and it would hurt like crazy. But boy, it changed my thinking.
Yeah.
Now, that's obviously a fairly graphic example, but is there more, let's just say, user-friendly ways of changing our processes, our recordings?
That's great. You know, it takes a willingness. If we are willing to change, there are techniques and processes that aren't that difficult. And that's what I love about the work I do as a life coach. I inspire people to pay attention. A lot of the study I did is what's called notice what you're noticing. So you're curious about your behavior. You don't beat yourself up, oh, I'm doing that again. But you open yourself to a bigger possibility of like, oh, look at that. I'm doing that again. And so you open a door to being more curious about your behavior. And then you're more open to change. One of the biggest tools I use and give out is gratitude. Gratitude is a causative energy. And so when we can be in a state of gratitude, even when it's not pretty in our lives, if we can be open to, there's something here for me to learn, or there's something important happening here in my life, and be grateful for that, it can open us to a solution that we may have not thought of before. I think it was Albert Einstein that said, you can't solve the problem with the same mind that created it.
Same level of thinking.
Yeah, so we can't solve a problem if we're like this in our mind. We have to be more expansive and open. And I use many different techniques to have people kind of open to, again, the possibilities that are available. It's through the breath. I mean, the yogic system has a great connection to the chakras of our body. I work with that, and the breath, how the breath opens us up. And there's just many wonderful techniques to use.
Wonderful. I see, it's so easy to say, well, for every problem or everything you step in or every difficult situation, there's something that comes out of that you can say, that helped me, I avoided getting hit by a bus because I stepped in something, or, just crazy stuff like that we can look at and say, what did this teach me? Or what did I learn here that's going to keep me from being, repeating those behaviors again? What are some of the techniques that you find helpful to reposition, let's say reframe what we experience and turn that into a positive instead of always dwelling on, oh, that happened again, or that's
right.
Like me, I'm always failing at that, or
right.
Those are recordings that are so destructive.
They are, and I have a formula called the Grace Formula, and it's part of what's called the creative process, which is nothing new. It's just I've put it into an easy format for people to understand. And the Grace Formula is about pulling the weeds of limited thinking, planting a new seed of an intention, nurturing the soil, and then reaping the harvest. It's really that simple. It takes time, and we have a lot of weeds in our mental garden, I have to say. So it's not just a one-time deal where you're going to pull one weed. It's like a regular garden that we know in a garden, you can't just plant seeds and have all the weeds around. You have to remove the weeds in order for that garden to flourish. So it reminds me, and people say, well, what are the weeds in my consciousness? Well, only you know that. Right. And there's a great story about how elephants are trained. You may have heard this before. Elephants are trained by having a shackle attached to their foot, and that shackle is attached to a 10-foot, 12-foot chain that's staked into the ground.
As babies, right?
As babies. So as a very young age, the elephant can only go that far, right? So it's trained. At some point, the trainer removes the shackle and the chain, and the elephant still only goes 10 or 12 feet. And why? Because it's been mentally conditioned to have a limit. So it doesn't know that there's no limit. And so I remind myself and my students and clients, what limitation is in our mind? Well, I'll never be successful. Maybe somebody told you that. You can't sing. You're clumsy. We hear those things as children and maybe think we don't carry them, but they're buried in our subconscious. That's a limitation. That's that chain. And so what I help people do is to find that root limit that may be keeping them from being successful, from being happy, from being healthy, from moving forward in their life, stepping into that river of change that can be a little scary.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's a great metaphor. I mean, I can really relate to the understanding of pulling weeds and planting the seeds that you want there. And I think a lot of us, like you said, we know quite a few of the limitations. When asked to be brutally honest with ourselves, we could do that. I think that there's probably a lot of things that may be in the background, that subconscious programming, like you were suggesting, that we may not know. So I know it's easier to get to those things that are at the forefront of our mind and say, okay, let's deal with the easy weeds first, but let's do some real bending over here for how do you get to the hard ones that we don't know or we may not remember?
And that's where quantum processes come in. I do NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I also bring people into a mild meditative trance state, like hypnosis. It's a very mild form of hypnosis, to drop them into that place where it's very clear of what's going on.
That subconscious can
The subconscious will tell you, yes. And that's where the change happens. So you can say all the affirmations in the world and that you want, and the result won't happen, or it will take a very long time. But when you can get to the root of the problem in the subconscious, remove that weed, plant the new seed, it's much faster.
Right.
The shift and the change is much faster, and I see it all the time with people. It's very possible.
Well, I think that's an amazing thing. I mean, in my practice, of course, we do get into that part of, we call it NeuroEmotional Technique, where we go back and find out what are those things that you don't recall that are creating troubles for you. So you've mentioned that you have a couple of tools for that to help people get to those points where, again, they may not understand or know that that's keeping them back, that's limiting behavior, that's limiting their progress. What are some of the tools then to transition out of that? I mean, so if you tell me that, or I tell you, I guess, because of the work that you do, that I had an experience that caused me to sabotage behaviors, what are some of the ways that I might approach changing that?
Well, again, I give different kinds of homework for people depending on what it is that they need to pay attention to. And it's intention and it's attention, and it's really paying attention to your feelings. Is this action I'm going to take feel expansive or constrictive? That's a really easy way to check into your own self. Is what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say feeling expansive or contractive? It's just simple. And so when we notice that, again, it's going back to noticing what we're noticing. If we notice that, we can have that moment, take a breath, and remind ourselves, because it takes practice. This is practice. The mind is hardwired for negativity, and so we have to continually kind of monitor and just pay attention, not freak out about it, but just be in a place of like, wow, I'm really willing to change, and so I'm going to pay more attention to the way I'm behaving or reacting, and I'd rather respond. So I have different things I call bookends. In the morning and in the evening, I encourage people and myself to start the day with intention of how you want the day to go. That you just that's all you have to do. You just open to this day is in my favor. How can I serve? I feel ready to expand into something new. Whatever you want to say, you open the day to that. And then at the end of the evening, I have a gratitude journal by my bed. And I know a lot of people know this. You can write 5 things you're grateful for. And the other thing I add is successes. 5 successes. What was I successful at today? And it could be something really small. I made that phone call. I answered that email that I had been putting off. So I put a little check mark. And then when you write that down, then you savor it. You take a moment and you just, I did something. I did that. It was good. I did a success. And just 5 little things you can write down. And what it starts to do is change that neurology of, I'm doing good, I'm doing good, I'm doing good. So it shifts those neural pathways. As you know, when we continue to do the old behaviors, we have that rut in our neurology. And so changing to something new requires practice, attention, intention, and eventually we stay on that path long enough. The other is just going to fade away because we're not paying attention to it anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you've hit the nail on the head that it's so much easier, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's so much easier for us to dwell on the negative aspects because, I don't know, they say that misery loves company. There's a reason for that. And I've not really understood that my whole life. I've been one of those people that's, people say, well, you're so positive, because I don't know. I just find that when I commiserate with people, it's kind of like a short-term endorphin thing, but afterwards I think, oh, well, that just didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so, why do you think, and maybe this is part of our programming, you mentioned it, it's so much easier for us to have a negative outlook. And really, for everyone out there who's listening, ask yourself, how many remarks a day are positive that come out of your mouth, and how many are grumblings or complainings or finding the negative about something? So how would you help us examine what comes out of our mouth? I mean, or our thoughts.
Yeah, again, it's just noticing. Mm-hmm. And it's a simple thing because it is unconscious behavior that we think negativity. It's kind of, again, hardwired. Yet it is possible to switch it, but you have to first notice that you're even doing it. Mm-hmm. It's like anytime somebody wants to change a bad habit, unless they admit they have this bad habit, it's never going to change. So you understand that, oh, I'm thinking this way and it doesn't feel good. Again, I go back to that expansive or contractive. How is it feeling in your own system? And one thing I talked to my yoga class about the other day was the idea of when someone sneezes, we immediately say, bless you. Have you ever thought of that? You don't know the person necessarily. You could be in a public place, you hear someone sneeze, and we just automatically say, bless you. And I was thinking about that and how our instinctive nature is to bless someone, not to judge them, not to say, well, who did you vote for before I bless you? What religion are you? Why do you have so many tattoos on? We don't do that. In our true essence, we bless people in a natural way. And so that was like this big aha for me. And so now I have a practice where I just bless people. In my mind, I don't say it necessarily out loud. And I do it now, especially at a stoplight. I'll be in my car and the cars will be passing by, turning in front of me, and I just bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. And I just bless everyone. And it's been a really heart-opening experience. It's been really fun. And then especially to do it, people I don't really like how they behave.
Bless you, learn to drive.
Yeah. And take my hands off of it. So it's been a really interesting observation that, because, you've probably heard this, and that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Have you ever heard that?
Absolutely.
So if we don't pay attention to our spiritual essence, and we go through life only doing the humanness, it's a struggle. It can be a struggle, and it can be much harder. But when we can say bless you, I feel like that immediately drops me into my essence of the true who I am, my soul, my spirit.
I think that, what I'm hearing you say is that we need to capture some of that stillness where we aren't being bombarded by negativity, which, I mean, any media that we seem to look at, that's where they make their money. So we have to realize that those influences tend to reinforce our negative behaviors. And I agree with you. I think that the hardwired part of it is, I mean, historically, maybe 100,000 years ago, we were thinking something's going to attack me at any minute. I might be eaten if I don't. And so you're constantly looking out for the negative that might happen, or perhaps the positive once in a while. So I can eat that. But by and large, I think we are hardwired that way. So the evolved person has to be, okay, realizing that's part of my hind brain, my basic brain, but my bigger part of my brain is all about communicating, working with other humans so that we can be better. And that requires a little bit more than just that hind brain working 24 hours a day. So some of the techniques you were telling me about earlier are really interesting to me, because I think that these are not intuitive. People will look at these and go, well, that sounds hard. Or I don't know if I can do that. Or everybody around me is negative. How am I going to change that? So can you dig a little deeper with us and say, all right, let's take Sally here, and she's had some real troubles with relationships or something that you find commonly, and how would you approach that? In other words, some of the techniques that you find that are helpful to people, just to give us a taste.
Yeah, well, I think in that idea of relationships, which is a big issue for many people, it really comes down to our self-worth, our self-esteem, our self-understanding. We can we can point fingers at everybody out there and blame people. That creates what's called victimhood in us. And so our life then reflects that everybody's against me. That will get you nowhere. It will create more circumstances of feeling uncomfortable or unhappy. And so I would work with someone on building that self-love, self-esteem, power, poise, through different yogic practices, through different breathing, through the subconscious work, through connecting to their essence, their higher power, the universal life force, whatever word you want to use. That's our like our co-partner. When we can have a solid base of understanding of our self-worth, I believe that everything on the outside will shift and change. We're not trying to change people out there. I'm not. I'm encouraging people to change within. It's really an inside job. And I know we hear that, and yet it's so true. Yeah. We're creating what we're seeing. We are creating it.
So, and that's true. When oh boy, there's several things I wanted to hit on here, but so it sounds like if a person is interested in making some of the positive changes, that there would be steps that they would need to take to identify what their self-worth is. Is that a survey that you might do with them? Is that does that take place during a meditative state or a hypnotic?
No, there can be just questions. I have a list of questions, and this is what many life coaches do. We have a list of questions of what is the issue right now in your life that you're looking to change, for instance, and then we will ask different questions. Mm-hmm. It's different than therapy, I feel, in that I don't have to dig into the past really a whole lot. It's more about moving people forward, not having to figure out who did what to who. It's about momentum. It's about moving forward. So there are certain questions, and then I would bring them into more of a meditative place and and then expand that even more.
Mm-hmm.
To reveal what it is what weed that is that we need to just gently pull out. It's very painless.
Right.
And then paying more attention to what it is you do want. So we pay less attention to what you don't want, because that just perpetuates it.
Yes, I was just going
We
to ask
pay
you
more
about that.
attention to what you do want. And then I have all these different things. I help people just keep focus. And that's why I'm there. I'm an accountability coach. I'm a motivation person. So I keep moving people in the direction. No, you don't want to keep looking there. Let's move this way. And it's just like a dance partner. No, I'm going to lead you this way. So I know all about partnering in dance.
Right. So you can help celebrate their wins. I mean,
Yes,
that's what you're asking them
definitely, yeah.
to keep track of wins. The more you win, the more you want to keep that feeling of, I'm moving forward.
I love that, because just the other day I had a client who I've been working with for off and on for over a year, and she had some very serious issues. And yesterday or the other day, I noticed in a text we had that we were having a very different conversation now than what we would have had a year ago, which was very victimhood, poor me, very, totally distraught. We're having a very different conversation. And I noticed it. And so I texted her back and I said, look at that. Look at this conversation we're having. Bravo. Yay, yay, yes, yes, yes. Let's celebrate. She texted back and said, I know. I recognized it too.
Well, I can see a huge potential here for helping people, but I also see, because my two kids have gone through school and they teach them victimhood now. This is really their emphasis. And they may deny that, but I can see talking to them, their friends, where they feel like, they're going to meet obstacles because they are going to be oppressed, or they have this going against them, or you're white and you can't do the things that everybody else. I mean, there really needs to be, I think, in schools, a way of helping kids say, okay, your reason to be and your success is going to depend on your ability to communicate and be okay with who you are and be your best. So how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Do you work with kids too?
I haven't worked with kids, but that's a great reminder that it's important to encourage and start this, because we did not learn it as kids.
Oh, no.
We didn't learn to feel expansive. And also, I have some concern now in our culture because of the technology, that everybody's on this, and there's no interaction, and we're so sucked into our phones and our electronics, and it's really important to have quiet time. The nervous system needs quiet time, and that's what deep breath and yoga and different processes help us to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms us down. And that creates tonic chemicals, going back to what we first started with. So I always encourage people to turn off your phone. Don't go to it the first thing in the morning. Sit and breathe and meditate for 10 minutes before you turn on your phone.
Boy, that's great advice. And I know my kids, I've told them this a number of times. I think they have had the experience of going through meditation programs, and they know how to do that, but it's an epidemic of anxiety. I would like to encourage people to come to one of your programs and to bring the kids, because I think this is going to be a valuable family experience. Can you tell us a little bit about how our audience can get in touch with you, and if you have a program coming up?
I do. I actually have a program at your office.
Oh, that's coming up.
On Wednesday, April 17th from 6:30 to 8. It's a program called Mind Gardening with Heart and Soul. I'll talk a little bit about what I did today, and I will lead people through processes, so you'll actually have an experience. And it's at the Dynamic Chiropractic office. And you can contact me for more information at www.grace, Grace, yoga, yoga.com. And that is my website. I have all kinds of information and free meditations, free yoga classes on there, and insight about my work as an inspired life coach.
Fantastic. Is there a phone number if people want to call?
Yes, 530-488-0620.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. This has been
Thank you
really
so
fantastic. I know it's going to help a lot of people look a little bit inside, see how they can be better outside.
Yeah.
So thank
I
you again.
appreciate it. Thank
and
you.
thank you for listening to Health Matters.